Okay, good evening all. Thank you for coming along tonight. My name is John Dove and I am the founder of the National Speed Routing Competition, and welcome to our second series of Q&A events. This is slightly different to the first sort of series of Q&A events that we did, because last time we looked at different branches of the legal profession in terms of the actual professions themselves. Within this series, we're going to be looking at different areas of practice. So I've tried to focus on some of the more more common or more frequently found areas of the law. And tonight we're starting with commercial law. And I thought that I would start with commercial law because it's one of those areas that a lot of students say that they're interested in. You tend to find that there's different camps of law students. So some will go to law school having watched Rumpole of the Bailey and thought, you know what, I want to be a criminal barrister. But equally, you get a lot of students that will have seen Suits, seen the cool sort of outfits that they wear, the swanky officers, all the money, and think, you know what, commercial law is for me. But if you ask most law students what is commercial law, they probably couldn't tell you. So I thought that this would be a good event for law students to come along, ask questions to practitioners within those fields of law, and really gain a good insight into what it involves. And tonight you'll find that there's a wealth of experience on this panel. So you'll find that people are practicing within all different areas of commercial law. So hopefully you'll find this session very useful. So I'm going to start by working my way around the room and introducing each of the panelists to you. So I'm going to start with Dave Chester. If you'd like to introduce where you were, what your position is and your experience.
Hi everyone, so I've just finished my training contract. I finished yesterday actually, and I'm looking to be admitted tomorrow, fingers crossed. So hoping to get the badge tomorrow. Starting a new job on Monday at Clark Wilmot in their property litigation team in Bristol. So yeah, that's me summarised in about 15 seconds.
Thank you. We have Danny Greenland.
Hi, yeah. So I currently work as an associate in the Linklaters Technology, Media and Telecommunications team, and previously trained at a regional firm in Liverpool called Barrett.
We have Greg Mazgajczyk. I hope I've pronounced that correctly. Correct me if I haven't.
No, I've heard worse. It's fine. Yes. So my name's Greg. I'm a corporate solicitor at the Manchester office of Irwin Mitchell. I trained there as well. So I'm in the BLS. I was in the BLS stream, and before that, I did a history degree, and then the GDL, followed by the LPC.
Thank you. We have Stephen Barrett.
Hi everybody, I am a commercial chancery barrister, which means that I'm part of that bit of the chancery bar that does commercial litigation, but refuses to admit that we aren't still chancery barristers because there's a massive fight that no one really cares about. On that point, I go to the commercial court, I sue people over money, I am in all ways and means a commercial barrister, but there really is still a line between us, which I hope I can explore later.
Look forward to hearing about it. And finally, we have Nouman Bhatty.
Hi there, I'm a real estate solicitor at Saleh in Disbury. Originally, I trained at Wedlake Bell in London and been doing this job now for about, oh God, nearly coming up to 10 years. So that's me.
Excellent, thank you. So those are our panelists for tonight. The way the evening is going to work is we will start for the first 45 minutes or so, working through some of the pre-prepared questions that people will have sent in when they signed up. After that, we will then go on to any spontaneous questions or impromptu questions that you have on the night. And then finally, we'll round up with a sort of final piece of advice or words of wisdom from each of our panelists. You'll notice that there's a chat box during the evening. If you think of any questions, feel free to pop your questions into the chat, and then we can work through those in the second part of the evening. Or equally, if you feel brave enough to come onto video and ask the question verbally, you're more than welcome to do so. Just pop your hand up when it gets to that point. Students, I'd ask if you could keep your microphones on mute during the evening, unless of course you are asking a question. And those are the rules for tonight. So without further ado, we will jump straight in. So the first question is, can you describe a general working week in the life of a commercial barrister or solicitor and the nature of the work involved? So we'll start with Danny on this one.
Okay. I suppose the immediate thought is no, you can't. Each week is different, and that's probably one of the best things about the law, and one of the things that keeps it really interesting when you're working in it. I can give you an overview of a recent week. So, for example, at the moment, I'm working on a telco deal with a client that's based out in Hong Kong. So most of my week has consisted of waking up quite early in the morning to some emails, looking at calls to go in the morning to discuss drafts we've seen from the other side. We'll then spend the rest of the day marking up issues lists or amending those drafts, getting them back out to Hong Kong in time for them to look at them overnight, and waking up the next morning to do it all again, to move along to the client's timetables. You know, other weeks though, you could be thinking about maybe writing articles, reading articles, going to training sessions, or doing smaller pieces of advisory work. So the commercial sector of the law involves not just the transactional side, there's the advisory side and then the litigious side as well. So yeah, I think the answer is essentially no. You just can't pick a standard working week.
Excellent. Thank you. Good start there. Stephen, do you have anything to add to that?
No, I mean, it is the standard answer, and it's true. Commercial practice is exciting and varied. That's why it doesn't really fit a standard week pattern. My cases are hardly ever similar to a case that, certainly not one that immediately preceded it. So you're always jumping around from issue to issue. The similarity in terms of what I do as part of commercial litigation is, you know, it's the roles building court. It's some of the same judges, although I'm in Queen's Bench division, in the Chancery division, and in the commercial list, and there's a bit of jumping around, but the legal issues are often the same. There's often points of contract, points of procedure, and injunctions are very important in commercial. Points of tort, because tort is very important, and one of the reasons I get brought in is because there are also points of trusts, something the commercial bar refused to admit for quite some time, but there are points of trusts. I had a bank that fell down in a foreign jurisdiction, and believe me, when a bank falls down, you need somebody who knows about trusts. And the other one I do is financial services regulation, where I will go total full-on nerd, because I will do non-contentious stuff, which is like Danny. I will just do regulatory advice and regulatory procedure. I do it because I find it very cathartic. As an undergraduate, I hated statutes, which is how I ended up as an equity lawyer. But in later life, I realized I hated the Law of Property Act. And I fell in love with the Financial Services and Markets Act. I can see Nouman smiling because I've just defended all the property lawyers. Good, they deserve it. They can't draft. But it isn't. There is variety in commercial, and we do cool things. I mean, the one thing that bugs me is that publicly funded lawyers are often sort of hogging the limelight. I had a very close friend. I have a very close friend who's a silk in family. And she flagged up a young person from a disadvantaged background because she was from family. He'd been in care proceedings, and I mentored him, which is great. And I was chatting to her at the time. We were both going to Africa to work on a case. But of course, I mentioned, well, I think the first class lounge in Nairobi is lovely, and she did not know what the first class lounge in Nairobi was like. That is the difference, really, between us and the publicly funded lawyers. But no, I don't think there is a standard pattern, because I think commercial law is interesting. With one of my other hats on, I run a charity called Big Voice London, and we once had a group of young people get very, very excited over 13 weeks about insolvency law this stuff is interesting. I refuse to believe it is boring. Technical, but it is fun.
Thank you. Very in-depth there. Moral of the story, guys, if you want to go to the commercial bar, pay attention in your equity classes. It could come in useful. And then finally, Dave, do you have anything to add from a trainee's point of view?
Yeah, pretty much what's been said, really. You know, every week is different. Every day is different, to be honest with you. You know, whatever seat you're in, even if it's not commercial work, you know, you're generally doing something different each time. But yeah, pretty much what the other guys have covered, really.
Excellent. All right. We'll jump on to the next question now. And it is, what was the most difficult case you've worked on? And what were the skills that were needed for it? Greg, would you like to start with this one?
Yeah, sure. So as a transactional lawyer, as a corporate lawyer, I probably can't say about a case. I did do some litigation in my training contract, but I don't think there's one particularly that stands out. So in terms of perhaps the most difficult deal that I've worked on as a corporate solicitor, most deals have their challenging elements, and that's one of the good things about the law, is that every deal that comes across your desk is different to a certain extent and has different technical challenges, perhaps. But there's one that sticks out that happened late last year. It's a relatively small M&A deal that I assisted another office on. But it was quite complex in that there was a lot of different elements. So there was a reorganisation before the share deal. So in terms of just the technical expertise that as a sort of 1-2 month qualified lawyer I had to draw on, that was sort of quite a good challenge. And it also, I won't say any identifying details, but the lawyers on the other side were fairly difficult. So you also, as well as actually dealing with the technical things that you have to do, there was also sort of a constant need to justify everything that you send over and sort of defend yourself. So that was another element that doesn't often happen. I'd say in transactional law, I think we perhaps get on a little bit more than litigators, but yeah, I'd say there's, to sort of sum up, there's a lot of difficult and challenging things that you'll come across. That's why we do what we do.
Excellent, thank you, Greg. And Nouman, I'm sure you've had some tough cases in property. Any stick out for you?
Oh, it depends really. I mean, I'm currently at a stage where I'm now also mentoring other junior associates or trainees. So I see different challenges. I mean, when I first qualified, I think as a solicitor, or generally as a solicitor, you sometimes come across situations which are unknown, and you find you're all alone on an island. And you do feel as if in that situation you have to, you do feel as that in that situation you have to stand out, and you have to be confident, be astute. So, I mean, one of the earliest transactions I did was a building block up north near Middlesbrough, and converting from residential units to commercial units. Transaction all done from myself from start to finish, and that was quite daunting. And you have to reassure yourself in those situations that what you're doing is right, and there's no issues here whatsoever, and you have to be confident, because I think that's one of the skills I feel as a lawyer that I've had to gain and take on board, the ability to know when you're right, and the ability even in the dark to go through and manage through to get your point across. So I mean, like I said, those instances, I mean, I can't specifically say one case was more difficult than the other. They all are challenging, but those points where you come across right at the boundaries of law, or at the boundaries of, well, there is nothing else here, there's no precedent, there's there's nothing here that that can resolve the issue, but you know, the ability for you to utilize the law, I think that is in itself something challenging and something that, you know, I find that it takes time to adapt and deal with.
You're absolutely right there, and that does come up quite often, whereby you'll have a legal problem and sometimes there is no precedence, as you say. You know, there might be some statute, but it requires some interpretation. It happens quite a lot in crime, actually, and we find ourselves going to court and having to have legal arguments on points. And quite often it really comes down to how confident you can be with that point and presenting it in court. It really is about being robust in your legal research, so to speak. So it really is quite important, and confidence is key. Next question is specifically related to the bar. So this one will have to go to Stephen. The question is, would attaining a commercial pupillage be unfeasible for non-Oxbridge candidates? Would it be better to first train as a commercial solicitor and then convert to become a commercial barrister?
It's a very important, I mean, I think the first bit of it is very easily battered out the field. It's perfectly feasible to not come from Oxbridge. The idea that you must come from Oxbridge is a misnomer. We have many members of chambers who went to other universities, and it's something I don't think people should let hold them back. I grew up very poor. I do not sound poor, and I call that process posh washing. But when I was very young and doing my degree, I got very worried that a friend said, "Oh, my dad knows a QC." And I was like, "Oh no, he can be a barrister and I can't." And that really was a fantasy of my own making. I ended up as a barrister and it was fine. So I think the first point is not right. You do need to have very strong academics. That is absolutely vital. And you must have very strong academics in contract and in tort. I mean, if you just go to the commercial bar purely, then maybe not equity. But you do need to have very strong academics. It's absolutely unavoidable. It's how we disintegrate. It's how we disseminate between candidates. I think it helps to love law, but not everybody does. I mean, I tend to really get on with Lady Justice Asplen because she really loves law and I really love law. But there is still people who don't really love law, who like doing the deal and being commercial, who are very successful as commercial litigators. So it's not vital. The second part of the question is very interesting. It's a question that perplexes me more and more increasingly because I mentor people who are from the background I was as a child, and I am very well aware of how high the financial barriers to entry now are. I don't think anybody should choose to be a solicitor, certainly not without trying, if your heart really is at the commercial bar. But it is a perfectly valid route. It has been trodden, it is well trodden. I could name individuals, I won't, but it's a well trodden path. If you're going to do it, qualify as a solicitor first. I completely see the logic because they pay for everything, and we are really bad at that. We've got some quite nice pupillage awards, but don't seem to have linked up the fact that there are gaps between before you even get to that point. If you're going to do it, the one thing you have to do, and the solicitors here will correct me if I'm wrong, but I think it's true of making the jump from associate to partner, is that you must have a view to clients and work. So if you want to come over, I've sat on our committee when we had an application from a solicitor who wanted to convert to the bar, and it was a very long letter explaining why they'd be a very good barrister. We would have tested that. What would have perhaps got that person an interview is X says they'll give me work. And that's perfectly fine. This is the commercial world. Talking about clients, understanding that it is about instructions and work is I think, is definitely the best way to get yourself an interview. If you go down the route of saying, I want to qualify as a solicitor and ultimately become a barrister, get yourself to the position where within a few years you can be writing to chambers saying, here is not a business case, because we're still babies in terms of understanding commerce, but here is an argument for why I would get work and why I understand that is important, and how I would be not just a barrister, but I understand the other bits of being a barrister, which are, getting work and feeding yourself. So I think it's viable. I think more people will be doing it. I'm conscious more people are doing it. because the numbers are so bad. But I still, a part of me would rather you tried first. But just apply for pupillage from the GDL or your law degree. For goodness sake, don't shell out for the waste of time that is the bar training course. I'm the oldest, I think, on this panel, but I think we can all agree I wear it well. When I completed my course, which is then called the Bar Vocational course, I went to a lovely party at the Middle Temple. I shan't name who was the master of the Middle Temple, but the person who was taking me was very proud and said, "Oh, Stephen's just finished his Bar Vocational course," and he shook my hand and went, "Oh, very well done, Stephen, very well done." And I'm an inherently honest person, so I just said, well, to be honest, I thought it was a bit of a nonsense, and I didn't really feel like a proper academic course. And without missing a beat, he went, "Yes, total nonsense, we all know." And so I'd say, definitely do not shell out money for that thing until you are in a position where, you know, either you can or you know that you will get a good result afterwards. If this is recorded, I'll probably get arrested by BPP or something, but it's true.
Excellent, some good advice there. Let's hope the BPTC providers don't watch that part. Right, okay, we'll move on to the next question now. And the question is, how did you decide the area of commercial law in which you would like to specialise? Danny, would you like to start us on this one?
Sure. So, as you may or may not know, during your training contract, you'll likely, if you choose the solicitor route, of course, you'll likely do a number of different seats across various departments. Now, this can be set up in different ways. Some firms will do 6 seats each of 4 months. Other firms will do 4 seats each of 6 months. It was the latter in the firm that I trained at. And my first seat, which was started in September 2017, was in what's called the commercial department of Grabner's. And around that time, a new law was being spoken about a lot, and that law was the GDPR, which I'm sure lots of people will probably be familiar with by now, and resulted in a whole host of emails around the time. Ironically, even though it was designed to try and result in less emails arriving in your inbox annoying you. And on the first day of that seat, the partner that was supervising me dropped a hard copy printed on A4 paper of the GDPR on my desk, told me to read it 3 times, so I did. And I wrapped my head around it, and it turned out to be the perfect opportunity to do work that was probably a little ahead of my experience at the time, just because this law was so new. You know, there was no one out there that had any greater knowledge about the particular regulation than me. Of course, there's people that have been in the practice area, knew previous case law about it, but you know, they'd only had the draft for as long as I'd had it. And I really liked the responsibility that came with that. So when it came time to choose where I wanted to qualify, I think it was always going to be a feature of my decision, the quality of the experience that I'd had because of that timing. And then, yeah, I was offered a position to specialise even more deeply in data protection by moving to a specialist TMT practice rather than just a commercial law practice. And really jumped at it. And now I get to do some really interesting work off the back of that, not just based on data protection, but based on all kinds of tech and, you know, exciting stuff like blockchain and AI, autonomous vehicles. And I think it's really, really interesting and a great part of the law to be involved in. But I guess the point is, it can be slightly serendipitous with the practice area that you eventually end up in, just because you go through law school wanting to be a litigator, wanting to be Harvey Specter, who desperately wanting to do family law, I don't know, whatever it is that you want to do. When you actually get into practice, just be prepared for that to change and be open to it, and make sure that you're sort of sucking up the experience as you're going along and really thinking about how you want to spend the rest of your career.
Very good advice there, and it's very true what you say, that you just never know where you're going to end up. So I think the key really is to be open to opportunities. I mean, it's happened to me. I've switched practice areas and opportunities come from nowhere. So as long as you're open, willing to learn, stay ahead of the game. And as you say, because you've read the regulations very early on, you knew more about it, it put you in a very strong position. So I think that's a good thing. Whenever there are emerging markets, and we've seen how things have changed during lockdown, stay ahead of the game, and it puts you one step ahead. So a really good answer there, Danny. Do we have anyone else that would like to contribute on this answer? No. Okay, it looks like everyone's either fallen into the area of law or they knew all the way through. We'll jump on to the next question then. The question is, what were your legal experiences during university? I suppose it's a bit of an open-ended question, so people can interpret that how they like. If anyone's got anything they'd like to contribute. I suppose if we say legal experiences that you think have put you in good stead.
So as in like vacation placements or stuff?
It can be,
like
yeah,
that.
absolutely.
Well, I found when I was when I was at university that, you know, your own peers are doing the same degree and they're all getting vacation placements as such. And especially when in your second year, there's that pressure that you feel as if you really need to get a vacation placement, you really need to get some form of experience. And I was fortunate enough to do a 4-year course where I spent 1 year at Denmark, so it was University of Copenhagen, and I just had the decision, well, if I'm going to Denmark, I could apply for internships, international law firms, which are in Denmark, and I was able to get them, and it was a similar process, although a bit expensive in terms of flights, but they had the same remunerations where they pay on a weekly basis. So I found that to be quite useful, trying to look at vacation placements or internships either in European countries, or even, I mean, I know this is going to sound a bit exotic, but I also had the opportunity to do a vacation placement at Richard Butler's in Hong Kong. But that was more in terms of just trying to, I suppose, get a holiday as well. But once again, it was a 1 month vacation placement, and it was very insightful in terms of what type of experience an international commercial law firm would be like.
Excellent answer. Sounds like you've had some exotic trips during university as well. Mixing some jollies with your legal learning. Right. Does anybody else have any contribution on this answer?
Yeah, I'd probably say getting involved with pro bono work's probably a really good thing you can do. So certainly during the LPC for me, and I know the BPTC students as well, there was loads of opportunities to get involved with pro bono work. You know, assisting people at court, advising business clients. There was loads of different things like that. So I definitely think that's great to get involved in, and it's something to fill out your CV with.
Absolutely, really good answer there. I think you've hit the nail on the head with the sort of the volunteering work. I certainly did CAB, Assistant Advice Bureau, whilst I was at university, and I think that's good for a lot of reasons, because quite often you'll be meeting with, obviously during COVID time it won't be this way, but I did it pre-COVID, and you know, you have people coming off the street, they'll ask a question, they'll go through a triaging system, and then they'll come and they'll sit in a conference room with you and ask for advice. And that's exactly what you'll do as a barrister or a solicitor. You'll sit down with people and you'll be giving them advice. And quite often, you know, it'll be questions in relation to family issues, it could be financial issues. So from quasi point of view, you are actually giving them some financial advice there, commercial advice, which can actually be similar to commercial law on a very micro level. So it gives you that experience to sort of build your CV from there. So I think that you're building sort of the soft skills that's needed to be a lawyer in terms of advising and conferencing skills, but also on a micro level, building some of that commercial experience as well. And I think the other thing as well is that if people are interested in advocacy, it's going to court. You know, you've got to get yourself in court just to watch and learn what's going on. I always remember doing a commercial chancery mini pupillage actually, and I went along to court with the barrister. And it was a case management conference. And I was sort of first year, second year students, had no idea what a case management conference was. So it's always good to go along and learn what the court process is, what happens along the way. And I was so interested in this case, I made a note of when it was listed for trial and went along again to watch the trial, because a lot of people don't realise that the civil courts are open buildings as well. It's not just criminal courts you can go to watch. Not many people do go to the civil courts, but if you're interested in this work, certainly go along and watch, and it can be quite fascinating.
Just on that, but don't leave 10 minutes after I start talking, because that is very unsettling.
Yeah.
I know it's not always interesting, but I've done I don't know if this is the modern, goodness. So I was found to help this on the Twitter, which I have only just joined. Chambers made me do a video for the YouTube on this topic. So if you go and hunt it down, I think it's had 103 views, which I think is a vast achievement in Chambers. But I address there everything systematically. A lot of the points already raised, but there are other ones. I think I know it's hard. You want to have the best CV you can have. That's very sensible. We are at that point in the UK where it is very competitive. We're not, thank goodness, as bad as the US, where there's still things happen, like the relevant pages of Chitty are torn out of the library copy so that other undergraduates cannot learn the relevant law, which always struck me as particularly aggressive, but we haven't got that. But it is a competitive process. You want to take advantage of the opportunities around you at university to get yourself in the best position.
Just expanding on the point you said about going to court, John, what I did a couple of years ago was I emailed my local county court and asked them whether I could go and do some judge marshalling. So I sat with the judge for a day, and there was a variety of different cases. So that was a really good opportunity. And, you know, anyone can email in and ask, and a lot of judges are happy for someone to sit with them. So that's a good opportunity for students as well.
That's a great idea. Really is good. I did some marshalling myself, actually, only in the county courts, and I was sat with a deputy, and the deputy was giving me some sort of advice on what he thought about the quality of advocacy he saw in court, what he was looking for in the skeleton arguments. Don't worry, Stephen, you weren't in court that day. But it's always good to listen to the judge and see what their input is. So that can always be helpful. So that's a great idea, Dave. Okay. All right, we'll jump on to the next question now. What would you say are the best tips for gaining a better, rounded insight of the legal world? Does anybody want to jump in on this?
I can
Slightly hard, this one, I think. Sorry, Greg, carry on.
We'll start with Greg, then go to Danny.
It's I agree. It's a difficult one, really. The only thing that I can say, which is sort of more of a mindset, which I found helped me when I was sort of in law school and thinking about applying to places, is sort of relate the legal world to the world around you, rather than sort of seeing it as a separate, this is the legal world, this is where solicitors, barristers live, and this is the real world. Try as much as you can to, as you sort of go about your daily life, try and see the legal side of things and see how the law fits in. And a good place to start is just what you're interested in. So if your major interest is in sport, then keep up to speed with how, for example, legal changes impact on say, football clubs. Find out how lawyers are involved in sport. So there's sort of plenty of books and podcasts on things like that. And it could be music as well. So if you're a musician, you can perhaps think about how copyright affects you, and how a lawyer would help musicians and the music industry. And it's a bit sad, I probably shouldn't admit to this, but sort of as I used to walk around, and I still do it now a bit, you'll just see businesses and you'll think, well, I wonder who their lawyer is, and I wonder what they use lawyers for. So just sort of trying to just think about it as more of a natural extension of just the things that you come into contact with, I think is probably my best tip.
Well, thank you. And Danny, were you going to jump in as well?
Yeah, I think maybe approaching it from a slightly different angle, but you know, there's really great resources online to stay plugged into legal commentary sort of throughout your day and the weekend, and as you're going through university. Highly recommend Legal Cheek, which is a slightly tongue-in-cheek blog, but you know, lots of good news stories on there. Some very exciting comment sections that you can get lost in sometimes. I think you can follow legal commentators on Twitter. So if you follow people like the Secret Barrister or Joshua Rosenberg, who's a preeminent legal commentator, he writes in the Law Gazette as well. These people are tweeting all the time about the leading legal stories of the day. Those stories are appearing on Legal Cheek and similar blogs, and there'll be links on those blogs out to a more detailed news sources, whether it's the BBC, the Times, Financial Times, wherever. You can go and follow up on those stories and stay plugged into what are the real legal issues of the day. And you know, sometimes they break through into the mainstream media. You know, sorry for using such a cliche, but things like the UK Internal Market Bill. It was plastered all over lots of front pages when it was introduced into Parliament, and EU has since brought forth legal action over it. So just, you know, read into it. You can look at that bill online, and there's no reason why you shouldn't, and come to your own decision about whether or not you think those particular sections of the bill are in fact a breach of international law or not.
Excellent.
I just might jump in there because having been raised as a young barrister to not talk to journalists, I technically publish in a publication called The Spectator, which is a magazine that is read by people, like, I believe, unlike most of my articles. And the Daily Express effectively republished, didn't really change anything on that internal markets bill that I published. So we are sort of out there. I think Twitter's probably the best place. Certainly nice and polite. I like legal Twitter. It's full of nice, kind people being nice and kind and polite to each other, and not, as I understand, Twitter mainly is. I mean, I think that, I wouldn't go in the Legal Cheek comment section. That's too aggressive for me. I will befriend legal academics, but I think they're quite tough. Don't forget, Lord Neuberger, when he retired, in his retirement speech, made a very pointed remark about legal academics and their rudeness, and that was because a professor at Cambridge called Graham Virgo had said very, very rude things about a case called Menelaus on unjust enrichment. Now, Virgo was right, but he really was rude. But that is how you will stay plugged into this. There are ways, and we are doing things. I mean, like the Radcliffe YouTube channel I posted a link to. We are trying to be accessible.
Excellent. A lot of good advice there. I think we'll move on to sort of one more pre-prepared question before we move on to your questions. So the final one is, what advocacy quality or style is most important at the commercial bar in particular? I suppose there's only one person to answer the question.
It is not like this. So I am chatting to you in a chatty and accessible and friendly way. Being in a commercial litigation case, certainly in the High Court, is like having a one-on-one tutorial with somebody who is probably cleverer than you, who disagrees with you. Don't get me wrong, there are moments of levity and joy, but they, you know, 1 in 1,000. Mostly you are having very technical, and that links back to an earlier point, it's often legal argument. Don't forget how law is made in this country through case law. That means you either need terror, like crime, you need some compulsion to make people go to court, like crime or family, if something's really wrong, or you need people with bucket loads of money who can afford to get a load of clever people into a room in front of another clever person who then makes a case, and then who can afford, if an error is made, to drag all of those clever people up to being in front of 3 other really clever. It costs a huge amount of money. So the commercial bar, and certainly the joy I have in commercial law and litigation, is that we are often making legal points, not factual ones. And I think that's very important. To make that means that your style of advocacy is not showy. I do not make jokes. I am not this. I mean, you may all think I'm terribly dull now, but I am not this entertaining when I speak, because it is very serious and technical.
Okay, thank you. All right, I think we'll move on to spontaneous questions from those in the audience now. So if you can think of a question, either pop it in the chat, or if you want to ask the question verbally, pop your hand up and we can turn to you to ask the questions. So I'll turn to the chat now. First thing I can see is we have a comment from somebody that said, "Hi, I want to go into commercial law, but my first year grades for tort and contract were not the best. I passed with an overall mark of a 2-1 in my first year. Will it be difficult for me to be accepted into reputable commercial barrister chambers?"
I mean, this is a point that I made. It is a hard one. It is tricky. It will depend how bad they are. You can repair bad events by showing outside academic interest, by publishing legal articles in journals and repairing yourself that way, or you can repair with a graduate degree. I don't think my land grades were very good, but I went to a university where everything was done at the end, so I didn't sort of know that. Well, I just didn't have marks in the way that breaks down. It's going to be a case-specific one. Because commercial litigation does involve contract, tort, trusts, land, and maybe something else if you can make a good argument for it. There are ways to, if you really perform well in another subject. But yeah, academics are a problem. It's one. So I will always make the point that it's not all about Oxbridge. I think that is a misleading thing, but it is about academics. It just that is sort of the product. If we go to any, I'm next to Danny. Okay, so I've got my eyes drawn to Danny. So if I go to Danny's firm, Danny's firm's full of really clever lawyers. They actually, do you know what? They all are. David's firm and Greg's and Nouman's and Joseph's, they're all full of very clever lawyers. So why would they need me? So that, first of all, I have to have an academic argument for why they need me. My academics have to be good. And then I have to have a knowledge-based argument, as Danny said. I mean, he had one about GDPR. I've got one about, other areas I know. Have you ever dealt with this before? And those are how you get work. So academics is tied up in stuff. So I'm very sorry if you had a bad year. I think you can pull back. I strongly suspect you as an individual can pull back. But no, they do matter.
All right, thank you. Next question is, wouldn't those opportunities be affected by Brexit? So I suppose this is a question for the panel. Do we think opportunities within commercial law will be affected by Brexit? Don't know if any of our panelists will know much about that. Anybody want to contribute?
Yeah, I think training contracts are probably going to be, I'm not sure whether Brexit in particular, but obviously we're going through a recession at the moment, so I think training contracts are probably going to be harder to find. I know that during the 2008 recession, for example, a lot of firms, stopped advertising for training contracts because obviously they have to invest a lot in their trainees. So I do think it is going to be harder, yeah. To what degree, I don't know.
I think I started university in 2008, so that was sort of just as we were hitting the big sort of credit crunch, the financial crisis. And I always remember from my induction week, one of the first sort of induction lectures we went to, the lecturer said, lawyers are very resilient. They'll always bounce back. So no matter what happens in the market, there's always going to be opportunities there. And it's just about really staying ahead with those opportunities. Now, it could mean, as Dave says, that training contracts may be withdrawn for some time because firms may not be able to afford that. but it doesn't mean that all of the jobs will go. So it's a case of, you know, thinking ahead and looking at where the opportunities are, where the law might go, and there might be more paralegal opportunities, for example, chance for you to build your experience for a few years, and then when things sort of become more fertile again, then when the training contracts come up, then you're going to be okay. So I think the thing is, it's really about thinking laterally, and looking at where the opportunities are, where you can build a skill base. And in a down market like this might be the best time for you to potentially go out and build those skills. So it's just really about thinking sideways, thinking laterally, and how can you get ahead and gain the most experience during this time. Okay, let's see if we've got any more questions. Okay, next one, let's see. Right, what are your goals or aspirations for the near future? What do you want to achieve next? We've got quite a few junior lawyers on the panel here. Any goals or aspirations going forwards?
Yeah, well, I can try and answer that. I think as an NQ and beyond, whilst you're in your training contract, it's quite easy to say what your goals and aspirations are. So you want to qualify, and then a step before that, when you're in university and law school, it's quite easy because your goal is to get a training contract or join the bar and get a pupillage. So I guess as an NQ, that's where you start thinking, well, actually, I'm now in the area of law that I want to be in for the foreseeable future. And I guess there's several ways you can look at it. The simple way that I looked at it is just want to get as much experience as I can in the next few years. So say yes to everything, and just get as much knowledge as I possibly can. So that's really the only goal that I've got really in my mind at the moment.
Anybody else wants to contribute on this in terms of any goals or aspirations over the next few years? No.
Yeah, sure. So I think I agree with Greg that as you move past qualification, the way you think about your goals and aspirations definitely change, and a lot of it will depend on what you're looking to get out of your career. If you know, there's lots of different ways that you can go about being a commercial lawyer, and I can't speak towards the bar, but especially as solicitors, still offer the whole host of different opportunities. As a commercial solicitor, you might want to, you know, work your way right up, make a partner, bring in the big bucks, be Harvey Specter. You know, you might decide that's not for you. You might want to work in a smaller, more regional firm, spend a lot of time with your family, you know, and have that work-life balance. Or you might want to switch into the judiciary, into the bar, or, you know, into an in-house practice. So I think as it's almost slightly ironic that as soon as you get to the point that you've been working towards so hard, you have to make all these choices again. But very much in the early part of your career, almost the goal is just to decide which of those you're going to do. I think once you move past qualification, all of these goals become quite long term by necessity, and so you have to break them down into stages, and you can sort of have a shared stage for a variety of those goals. So your initial stage might be, like Greg says, to get as much experience as you can to put yourself in the best position to walk through any doors that open to you, to make the most of any opportunities that you're presented with. Or you might you might be able to focus in over time more closely on the particular goals that you're after. I'm not too sure what I particularly want to do next, but as was alluded to earlier before, one of the most important parts of your career as you become more senior is being able to bring in work and retain clients properly. I think one of the best ways to do that in larger firms in particular is to develop sector specialisms. So, you know, in the same way that I referred before to as a baby specialism, shall we say, in data protection, getting me to where I am today, my potential grown-up specialism that I'm looking at the moment is to explore the field of space law. satellite law, which again is one of those more cutting edge fields of law where you're not going to necessarily be presented with people with too much of an advantage on you, and see if I can make the most of that. So I think my short-term goal anyway is to educate myself on the space law and find opportunities to speak to people about it.
Interesting answer there, Danny. Just to come back to one of the points that you raised there, you talked about sort of, the different styles of firms, and obviously you've worked for a few different types of law firms over the years. How would you describe the ethos between sort of a smaller firm compared to a national commercial firm?
I think it changes a lot, and I don't think it is just about a firm's size, although that can be an indicator of culture, but it's more about the culture of the firm and the attitude of the leadership and the people that work there and what everyone there is trying to achieve. Brabner's, which is the firm that I trained at, is a very well respected but quite small, relatively regional player in the Northwest, a very traditional partner-led professional services firm, with great opportunities for lots of responsibility, great opportunities to work directly with partners, but nobody intended or wanted you to be there after 5 p.m. Everybody wanted you to go home, and it was understood that work-life balance was a very important part of the culture of the firm, and that the work that we were doing should not get in the way of your life or your family or the other things that you've got going on in your life. Now I work for Linklaters, which is a very different culture altogether. It's filled with ambitious people who very much want to be the best in their field, very much want to work on the biggest deals of the day. They want to know that the chargeable hours on their clock are the ones that are being reported on the front page of the Financial Times the next day, and that really shows in the culture that there's a feeling that everybody is working together to be the absolute best and to deliver the best that we can, and that does mean certain longer hours. It does mean working hard or maybe having less partner contact as a junior, and taking some of those tasks that would fall maybe to a paralegal or a secretary, or just not be part of a smaller deal at a smaller firm. But it's the culture of the firm that means that we're all prepared to do it anyway, because we're looking to be the best, and that's part of being the best, and that's why we have the reputation that we do.
Excellent. Interesting answer there. Okay, unless anybody else has any other comments on that question at all, move on to some more that have come into the chat. Okay, next question. How much scope is there at the bar to have a split practice between commercial cases and other areas such as public or human rights? So I'll turn to Stephen on this, but then we'll open it out even more as well, and see if this applies to the solicitor's profession as well.
I think the question broadly is about silos. So the bar is very siloed. There are about 14,500 barristers, but vast numbers of them do crime and family. So they may as well just be a totally different career to me. There is then something called the common law bar, or would often say it does civil litigation, which is doing things like PR and tort and medical negligence and injury torts, not economic torts. And of course, there's also the IP bar and the tax bar, who exist independent in their own life, and the employment bar. So once you get down, all wiggling all the way down, you get to the commercial and chancery bars, who still fiercely refuse to merge, despite the fact they obviously should. The commercial bar does have sets in it who do public law. Those are Blackstone and 11 KBW. That means I've just insulted someone who will exist, who I don't know, at one of the other commercial sets who does public law. It also means I probably shouldn't rule out the possibility I might have to do public law, although I'm actually allergic to politics in law. It's my great bugbear. I am a total snob. I think law is better than politics. I don't want it in law. I think it cheapens us. but other people disagree. But so there is possibility in commercial litigation for public law, definitely. Human rights was supposed to be a big thing, and it was brought in right when I started. On every single claim form, there was a box. Does this case raise human rights? It never got ticked, so the box has disappeared over time. Ironically, there are probably human rights issues in financial services law, I think, around maybe more equalities law, issues around age discrimination, because it's still permitted weirdly in bits of financial services law that I don't think necessarily makes sense. There's some scope for it, but broadly speaking, because we're in these silos and we want barriers between the silos, there isn't that much scope for what is traditionally called a mixed practice. The common law bar will do that. The common law bar will mix up doing road traffic accidents, medical negligence, and then appearing in a criminal court. That is part of their identity and their DNA. I respect it. I think it's a very useful thing. It's what I think Lord Sumption was calling for when he said that we shouldn't be siloed. But whether you agree with Lord Sumption or not is irrelevant. We are siloed. And in our practices, we tend to be really quite restricted. I make my flippant point about the commercial bar being a bit uncomfortable with trusts. They are comfortable now with those. I'm talking about 10 years ago when they really, what's a constructive trust again? But it's much more common. I do think the commercial bar and the Chancery bar will merge. There is scope for a range of practice within both of those, from insolvency to land to company to financial services to straight up contract fights. There is the F word, which is very exciting. It always brings with it just fun and drama, and it seems to me that post-COVID the F word is being pleaded all around the place. That's fraud. That's when life gets very exciting, because we have specific it raises specific flags when fraud is raised in a commercial context. It's a dramatic thing, but it does seem to be happening rather a lot. So there's a scope for variety, but it probably goes back to the idea of don't try and pre-plan your career too much. My head of chambers is an absolutely fantastic, really successful pensions barrister, probably the best pensions barrister QC that there is, although I'm sure other pensions QCs are available. He didn't start out doing pensions. He wanted to be an insolvency barrister, and he just started doing a lot of insolvencies where the key issue was pensions law. And then nobody else did pensions law, a lot like Danny's point, and all of a sudden he becomes the expert in pensions law. And now he's an incredibly successful pensions QC. Don't overplan. I think it is a mistake.
Excellent. Good advice there. Right. Moving on to the next question. Once again, it's been focused at barristers, but we'll broaden this out. It says, how can aspiring commercial lawyers stand out in such a commercial field? Does anybody want to jump in on this one?
I think I'll be the first to say it. Commercial awareness. It's that that phrase that a lot of people wonder what's it actually mean. But I think you do really need to have your head screwed on about commercial awareness if you want to make a really good impression on people. You should understand as far as you can, or at least try to learn about it if you don't, how the big commercial leaders of the world are moving around, why it's important, what hedge funds think of Brexit, how companies work, what an employee is as opposed to a contractor. All of these key issues, and then following the news stories of the day, like we were talking about the UK Internal Market Bill before. If you are an aspiring commercial lawyer, that should be right on the tip of your tongue if someone's asking you about what are the legal issues of the day. If you're looking for other big issues, you can check the UK Supreme Court pending cases list, which is always good for sticky subjects. But I think you can pick this up from a lot of different places, but it is always important to be convincing in understanding how the commercial world works, and how to convince boards of directors that you're going to be the man that's or woman or person that's going to be able to handle their case or deal the best for them.
Excellent. Great advice there. And does anybody else have anything to contribute on this answer? I think stemming on from commercial awareness, because as you say, Danny, it is so important. And I think looking at how sort of the commercial world impacts on you as a lawyer as well. So in terms of how is it going to affect you getting your work, and also more broadly within law, no matter what area you go into, how do you get paid? So is it private fees? Is it hourly rates? Is it fixed fees? Are you going into publicly funded work? Are you working on fixed fee agreements? Whatever it might be, because that's always important, and it affects how your workload is going to come in and whether you're going to be profitable or not. So that's always something to think about, particularly if you're going into interviews for law firms. So always think about how the commercial world impacts upon you. That's advice coming from a non-commercial lawyer, so do with that what you will.
Just while we're still on this point, I can see someone asked if there's particular websites or magazines that are good for commercial awareness. I think, obviously all good news sources, other news sources are available. I highly recommend the Financial Times as one of those papers that tends to be slightly less political and more focused on the numbers and how the effects pan out in the economy. It is aimed at a commercial audience. I believe you can get student subscriptions. I don't recommend buying a hard copy, A, because it's very expensive, and B, because it's ridiculously big. But they do have a number of free podcast series that you can download, as does The Economist. I'd highly recommend The Economist's weekly series, The Editor's Picks, which comes out every Monday, summarises three of the key stories from the magazine each week. That's a great way to stay plugged in, and you'll find a whole host of Economist podcasts. Harvard Business Review do a number of good series as well. I'm sure there are others that are escaping me at the moment, but I definitely recommend taking a good search through podcasts.
Excellent. I think there was another question that popped up just above there. Is Linklaters anything like Suits?
I was going to gloss over that one. Do you know what? Occasionally, very, very occasionally, it is. Very, very occasionally, it is. Sometimes you walk into a big room full of very impressive lawyers, all wearing very sharp suits with a great view in the background, and you think, "Wow, this is fantastic. This is absolutely brilliant." But other times it's 2 a.m. and you've been trying to persuade the printer to do what you want to do for the past 30 minutes. So it's not all glamour, but there is a lot to like about it, especially if you're lucky enough to walk into work, as I am every now and then. You can walk across London Bridge, and you've got the House of Parliament to one side, the City of London on the other, and down the bottom of the Thames is Canary Wharf. It can feel really good, and if that sounds like it's something that you'd like to do, I think, come and see what it's like for real.
Excellent. And I think stemming on from sort of commercial awareness and the state of the market, we do have two property lawyers on the panel. So I don't know how you see your practice areas, what's going to happen to yourselves over the next couple of years. How do you see your areas developing?
It's interesting that previously you mentioned when the previous credit crunch in 2008, I actually qualified at that time, and I saw a lot of property lawyers leave the practice, and I was the fortunate few that actually stayed. And at that time, I think you were mentioning that you need to think laterally or think about other avenues. And here, I don't know about anyone else. At the moment, we seem to be busy. And I think for myself personally, the previous credit crunch has made me more aware of what other skills I need to have, what other aspects of law that I need to grasp in order to move in situations where you might have a downturn, or you might be in a position where there's a danger that work either will dry up or that there may be a bit of a glitch. So for me, I don't see that much of an issue, but I'm sure some of the panelists may, or the solicitors will. But I think the way to get around that is to think laterally, to be slightly left of centre, and see what else is out there for you.
Excellent. Yeah, good advice, Nouman. And Dave, do you have any points on this at all? Or do you see it?
So I work in contentious properties, so it's litigation. So generally in recessions, with the market as it currently is, litigation tends to do quite well. We've certainly noticed an uptick over the last few months. So I think that litigation generally and property litigation will do well. Obviously, you've got the issue of tenants and landlords falling out at the moment, so that's quite a big one. So yeah, I think generally my area particularly is going to be on the up. General property, I wouldn't like to comment on that going forwards, but yeah, property, contentious property, I think there'll be a reasonable workflow for quite a while.
Excellent. All right, well, I think that brings us towards the end of the questions for tonight. So what we're going to do now is, for the final sort of 10 minutes or so, I'm going to turn to each of the panelists one by one to leave us with a final soundbite, a few words, piece of advice, some words of wisdom, just to take away. So a final takeaway message for the evening. So we'll start with Danny, as he's next to me on the screen.
So I remember applying for training contracts over a number of years. I didn't get it straight away. And I was actually listening to podcasts at that time as well, trying to build up my commercial awareness. And I remember hearing a quote from J.K. Rowling talking about how failure is success, not just leads to, but actually is success. Her point was that, even by setting yourself a goal that it's possible to fail against, you've already succeeded in at least setting yourself a goal, and so therefore moving forwards. And that there is the common cliche that failure leads to success because you're learning every time. But I think as lawyers in particular, until you reach the very top of your career, you're often handed in work to be absolutely torn apart, whether by the other side, by judges, by a supervisor, an associate, or by a partner. For us, that is what life is about, and it is about relishing that challenge and understanding that every setback, every rejected training contract application is practice for when you're sitting here as an associate and you're handed back a draft covered in red pen. It just carries on the same way. So don't see it as holding you back, and please don't give up. Please just see it as the beginning of your legal career.
Excellent, great advice there. Dave, any final words for us?
Yeah, mine would probably be think beyond academics, and see sort of every opportunity you get. So pro bono work, judge marshalling, connections are a big one. If your nan's friend's son is a solicitor, then try and get away in that way, and perhaps you might get some work experience out of it or something. So just look for any opportunity you can to sort of build your CV and make yourself stand out a little bit. So that'll be my final few words.
Excellent. Greg, any words of wisdom to leave us with?
Just basically building on what's been said. It's difficult. Getting a trading contract, I found very difficult, and it took me at least 2 or 3 cycles of applications to get one. But really, just don't give up if that's what you want to do. Have confidence in yourself, and prepare for every sort of assessment centre, every application, and treat it as a learning experience, because some of the hardest assessment centres and the ones that I did and I thought, that went absolutely terribly, actually, I didn't get them, but they were so good for a learning experience and thinking, well, next time I know what not to do. Have confidence in yourself, and don't give up.
Brilliant. Nouman, any final words?
I mean, just going back on what Danny's saying, that this profession is something I find, and I say this to some of my trainees, is that you have to have passion, and you have to perseverance. You have to have those two key elements, and if you have that desire, you'll be able. I mean, it will take time, and failure is not shouldn't look at it as a disappointment. You should look at it as a form of, you know, as Daniel's saying, success of going forward and how to be better. But passion is the one, and perseverance, I feel, is it's important in this field. If you have that, anything that's put in front of you, you're able to take on board and take it as a challenge. This is what law is about: problem solving. It's about challenges, and you have to have that desire to go through that and deal with it.
Excellent. Very good advice there. And lastly, we'll turn to Stephen.
Yes, I'll just talk for the bar, I think. And if you're going to go for the commercial bar, then you really do need to focus on law and have a good understanding of recent cases and decisions coming out of the commercial courts, the Chancery Division, and the Queen Bench that are finance and money related. That you need to submerge yourself fully in the world. It's one of the difficulties that commercial law is generally only on an LLM, but you can Google the academics who teach commercial law at a variety of universities and see what publications they've made recently, what cases they think are interesting in commercial law, and you can read them. You know, it's a point we made quite rightly about the internal market bill. You can read this stuff yourself and have your own view. Thank goodness commercial law manages to be less contentious. And I think that's a good thing. But that, I think, is the way. And then echoing David, that, you know, you will need to still be able to demonstrate a fully rounded CV. Mooting, I mean, I cannot say mooting enough. It is so strange to see somebody applying for pupillage who has not mooted. That is just, you must moot. And then the pro bono stuff and the other things I've suggested in the YouTube video are good ways, I suggest, of broadening yourself around. But to fully submerge yourself into law and commercial law is the best advice I can give for our bit of the bar.
Excellent. Thank you. Well, that brings us to the end of the evening. So I'd like to take this opportunity to thank all of our panelists tonight. Some very great questions were posed there, and I think we got some fantastic advice. So I'm sure we've all learned a lot from our panelists here tonight. Thank you to all of our participants for attending as well and for your questions. It's only, you know, with yourselves coming along to ask the questions and listen that we have an event like this. So thank you very much for coming along. This session will be put on YouTube as well, so you'll be able to watch this back at your leisure. And that was an interesting point that you raised there, Stephen, about mooting. And of course, we are the National Speed Mooting Competition. We will be launching some new events soon. So there will be a Winter Cup series coming up in November and December. There will be 2 very small competitions, and sign-up will be launched in the morning. So if any of you are on the mailing list, you'll receive an email in the morning with a link to the sign-up. Or if you want to be on the mailing list, visit the website, go on the contact page, fill out the form. You'll be added to the list and you'll receive information in the morning when sign-up goes live. They're only small competitions for now, so there won't be many places on there. So it will fill up quite fast, so keep an eye out for that. Next week, there will be another session. So next week, we have our criminal law session. If you're already signed up for it, great. If you want to sign up for the criminal law session, go on the website, fill out your details, and we'll send you the details in due course. So finally, just a quick thank you once again to everybody that's been here. The event tonight has been sponsored by publicspeakingtuition.com. And with that, I'll bid you all a good night. Thank you.